The shuttle dropped out of warp with a muted shiver, as though even metal hesitated before approaching Astraeus orbital complex. The station hung above Virelda's swirling storm belt like a luminous spine, its segmented platforms rotating with cold precision. Inside the shuttle, students adjusted their uniforms, exchanged speculations, and cast quick glances at the silent humans seated near the rear. Leora Vance didn't notice them, or she pretended not to. Her gaze rested on the planet far below, where lightning fractured the cloud seas in branching silver arcs. The sight wasn't intimidating for her, it felt like memory. Those storms had shaped her entire life. They taught posture, silence, timing. Speak only when necessary. Move only with intent. React too quickly and predators learned your rhythm. React too slowly and you never grew old enough to learn again. A soft chime signaled docking alignment. Cadets strapped in. Leora slid her palm across the restraint lock. The band tightened across her chest with a faint hum, but she remained still, shoulders relaxed, breath steady and shallow. Her pulse held a perfectly measured rhythm, 52 beats per minute. The shuttle connected with the station. A brief hiss, then the hatch slid open. A rush of filtered, cooler air swept in. Alien students surged toward the exit, eager to reach Assessment Hall 7 before preliminary scans began. Leora stood only after the aisle cleared. She stepped out into the corridor, letting the crowd move ahead while maintaining a controlled distance behind them. The corridor shimmered with metallic blue lighting. Panels along the walls displayed rotating emblems of the Galactic Education Authority, a stylized circle fractured into species sectors. Beneath each emblem hovered text that shifted languages according to the nearest biological signature. When Leora passed one, it flickered, glitching in a brief static burst before resolving into human standard. She paused an instant. The flicker repeated on the next panel. Something was misreading her. A gate checkpoint loomed ahead, scanning every cadet. Species icons hovered, confirming identity packets. When Leora approached, the gate pulsed red. A thin beam traced her figure. Processing. Error, metric undefined. The projection repeated 3 times, each louder than before. The officer stationed by the gate, a tall crystalline entity whose limbs refracted light, shifted uneasily. "State your designation," it said, voice chiming like glass struck with ice. "Leora Vance." "Virelda human candidate," she replied. The officer extended a fractal limb toward the display. "Your records are unreadable. Baseline markers, absent." "I submitted full data," Leora said. "You submitted something," the officer corrected. "What you provided doesn't match any calibration model. Proceed, but expect secondary evaluation." Leora dipped her head and walked through the gate. Behind her, several cadets whispered. She triggered an error. "No rank file? Then she won't last the first cycle." Their assumptions rolled off her like passing static. She didn't waste energy on speculation, only on information that shaped survival. Assessment Hall 7's entrance towered ahead. The doors were reinforced with alloy bands that pulsed faintly, syncing with gravitational stabilizers beneath the floor. Inside, the hall resembled a vast arena. Tiered seating rose in circular layers, packed with observing students. Hundreds more candidates stood on the testing floor, arranged in rows according to rank projections. Leora was directed to a side area marked unsorted. No one protested. She accepted the placement without remark. The room hummed with controlled gravity. Artificial pressure created the impression of heavy air, thickening each breath. Most cadets shifted uncomfortably, a few stretched as though preparing for combat. Leora simply balanced her posture, letting the force settle across her frame until it felt familiar. A booming voice echoed from the balcony above them. "Cadets," it called, "Assessment Cycle 1 begins in 2 minutes. Prefectors will monitor your responses. Any display of uncontrolled force, psychic projection, or unsanctioned aggression will be penalized." Drake Halser stepped forward from the prefect line. His scaled frame caught the overhead light, casting sharp gold reflections across the hall. At 19, he carried an authority earned through calculated dominance. He surveyed the room with predatory confidence before fixing his gaze on Leora. Most flinched when looked at by a Halser prefect. Leora blinked once and stayed perfectly still. Drake's nostrils flared, interest, not anger. He descended the steps, approaching the unsorted zone. Students shifted aside as he moved. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that the heat radiating from his armor brushed her skin. "You're the anomaly," he said quietly. "I triggered a scan error," she replied. "No," he corrected, tilting his head. "You maintained posture under gravitational tension long before the system activated anything worth measuring." His gaze sharpened. "Why pretend weakness?" "I'm not pretending." He studied her face, expecting tremors or avoidance. Leora offered nothing. Drake leaned closer. "Then prove your stillness is intention, not paralysis." Before she could respond, a tremor rolled across the hall, assessment cycle 1 initiating. The gravity field expanded in a sudden downward pull. Pressure climbed fast. A few cadets staggered. One fell to a knee. Drake braced himself, muscles locking. Leora adjusted her weight subtly, feet planting more firmly. Her expression didn't change. The floor vibrated as the hall escalated the field again, 5.5 G. Oxygen density dropped. Air tasted metallic. Several unsorted candidates gasped. A winged alien collapsed, wings crumpling. Drake turned sharply toward Leora, expecting strain. None appeared. "You should be trembling," he said. "Why?" Her voice remained soft. "This level crushes most species. Virelda teaches worse." He narrowed his eyes. "That is not arrogance?" "No," she said. Context. The hall surged again, pressure heightening until movement became strenuous for anyone unadapted. The oxygen fell to a thin, biting layer. Drake strained against the weight, muscles quivering as he fought to remain upright. Leora lowered her chin a fraction and exhaled slowly through her nose. A faint message flickered across the air above her head, response undetermined. The hall's calibration tried again. Error, parameters exceeded. A murmur rippled through the seething tiers. Drake's breathing turned ragged. He tried to hide it. "You should not be standing." "I'm seated," she corrected. He blinked and realized she was. While others fought to stay upright, Leora had eased into a sitting position the moment the cycle began, aligning her body with the vector of pressure. She hadn't been resisting. She had been cooperating with physics in a way the hall didn't predict. "Why sit?" he whispered. "Standing wastes effort," she said. "Effort invites mistakes." The cycle intensified once more, reaching a threshold the hall rarely used. A sharp crack snapped through the floor as stabilizers absorbed the surge. Leora watched the ceiling lights flicker. "You're breaking protocol," Drake said. "Protocol breaks when input exceeds assumption." He stared at her, confused, then angry at himself for not understanding. The hall lights pulsed red. The cycle ended abruptly, causing the gravity to drop so fast it felt like the floor lifted. Cadets collapsed as the sudden shift disoriented them. Gasps filled the arena. Leora rose smoothly. No wobble. No hesitation. Above them, the AI voice crackled through the speakers. "Unclassified candidate response, inconclusive. Further escalation required." Drake's jaw tightened. He stepped closer. "Escalation will crush you." Leora met his gaze, unblinking. "Then the system will finally learn something." The hall's lights dimmed. Stabilizers whined. Something deep within the floor began to charge for the next cycle. A second tremor passed through the arena, sharper, heavier. Cycle 2 was coming. And the hall, still unable to define her, had no idea what it was about to provoke. The second assessment cycle didn't arrive with slow escalation. It slammed into the hall like impatience given form. Gravity returned, violent and immediate, snapping every cadet downward before muscle or pride could react. The spectators instinctively gripped railing and seat alike, as if mere observation now carried risk. But the first figure to move was neither alien nor AI. It was an old instructor walking the perimeter, General Vorov Jaxaris, a war-scarred arthropoid veteran with a limp that clicked, not shuffled. He stopped once beside Leora, then twice, suspicion prickling his posture. "The girl whose file breaks machines," he said, almost to himself. Leora was already seated. Not displaced by force this time, by choice, and early. Her position was exact, legs crossed, spine straight, palms resting lightly atop her knees. The oxygen was thinner than on first entry, cooled further for species with respiratory reliance. A monitor drone drifted near her cheek, scanning temperature gradients along her skin, and misreading again. Vor tapped the tip of his cane against the floor. The hall surface twitched but did not crack. "You adapt by surrendering?" he asked. "I adapt by aligning," she said. The hall surged again, 7.2 G, oxygen nearly halved. One cadet's visor frosted. Another's cough sounded like tearing paper. The crowd's murmur died, pressure filling its place. This was beyond ceremony now, edging into system curiosity. Vor settled the cane under one segmented arm. "Cadet Halser," he barked. Drake materialized from behind a cluster of exhausted aspirants. His armor seals were overheated from resisting the first cycle. This room had demanded pride, and he had paid with sweat visibility and rank vulnerability alike. His eyes flicked toward Leora and narrowed, ego fizzing into something sharper, personal annoyance. "Yes, General," he said. "Engage preliminary compliance proximity." Drake blinked, not understanding the phrasing until the drones translated for nearby cadets as sanctioned close contact stress trigger. His nostrils flared, this time appreciating the flaw in the system. He descended the steps toward her, stepping over a fallen oceanic ring cadet whose gills fluttered fitfully in the low O2 mix. He stopped in front of the unsorted marker zone. Leora looked up, gaze flat, posture already compensating for the atmosphere change. A drop of condensation slid down a monitor strut near her shoulder, perfect detail, cinematic but irrelevant to immediate danger. Drake crouched to eye level with her, voice low, timing theatrical. "You don't get to skip hierarchy just because the hall can't name you." "Hierarchy is earned," she said. "Then earn it now." "I am," she answered, subtle emphasis threaded through the minimal words. He reached for her wrist. No dramatic camera slowdown needed. The action was sanctioned by the hall, ignored by its definition of violence, permitted by species misconduct exemptions. But the moment his glove seal brushed her skin, a spike gauge on the nearest drone exploded into digital frost, sparking like static snow caught in wind. Drone core saturation, limit exceeded. Red glyph chains scrolled in the air above the testing floor. Contact penalty initiated, the hall's AI voice boomed. The crowd expected score consequences. Drake expected humiliation data. Leora expected nothing at all, she was reading physics, not spectators. The floor beneath her crossed legs snapped outward in hairline fractures that radiated in concentric rings, not chaotic branches. Each line was orderly, calculated, expanding as the hall's oxygen drones tried to starve her sympathetic nervous system into panic response. The hall had never met a human whose stress reflex ignored chemical definition. Drake tried rising, effort wasted. He was still touching her, and the hall locked the contact into a penalty loop. "Release," he growled, suddenly straining. The door didn't wait. It activated force suppression through her, not against her. Oxygen dropped to 18%. Floor pressure spiked to 8.1 G. Neural feedback thrummed in the air, tasting of copper, ozone, frost, and mathematics the hall could not compute. Drake's gauntlet seals shrieked heat warnings. His fingers tried to unlock. They could not. Contact meant participation, and score meant measurement, and measurement meant penalty escalation, and penalty escalation meant using her body as the calibration relay. Leora exhaled and spoke her second sentence of the chapter. "Consequences aren't always violence." The hall surged again. The device under the floor, the gravity calibration core, older than most cadets here, exploded into a brittle howl and detonated downward, not upward, compressing matter along species baseline vectors except those it couldn't define. The floor shattered in a patterned collapse that looked like a flower blooming inward. Every layer was beautiful geometry and catastrophic timing. Drake was yanked into a kneeling slump, still touching her, armor whining. A monitor strut snapped from the ceiling, clattering near his shoulder. The crowd inhaled sharply. This was the moment they would replay infinitely in their minds. Boom! The gravity core imploded. Not nuclear. Not psychic. Physics error overflow. A wave of force rippled out, deleting drones midair. Light flickered. Drop. Dark. Restart. Oxygen recycled back in a harsh upward flood of stable air. The room normalized to 1G like waking from a bad dream. Every scoreboard glitch vanished into audit fog. Drake staggered to his feet, finally releasing her wrist, breathing harsh now in full audience view. That doesn't count as combat. Leora stood. No wobble, soundless boots, calm white-knuckled gloves, planet storms roaring behind her shoulders through the hall's open panels. It counts as correction, she said. General Vore watched her for several seconds, the longest silence he'd ever granted a cadet. Then he turned and said quietly, with a shake of his head. We don't test humans properly because we keep testing the wrong thing. The hall chimed an official reshuffle tone for incoming cycle rank 2 candidates. Leora was not resorted into any zone. Not by defiance. Not by resistance. But because Astraeus had no metric left that could even touch her without rewriting itself. The summons arrived as ink-thin text suspended over frost-washed glass. Authority review candidate, proceed alone. It came not from a drone, but from Astraeus itself, projected across Hall 7 in an impartial cadence that sounded almost respectful. The crowd inhaled, this time without malice, without ritual, only the instinctive awe of species encountering a gap in their own understanding. Leora Vance didn't preen. She adjusted nothing. Her boots clicked zero drama against the floor as she stepped toward the inner lift spool, a transport column that tunneled cadets directly to Vanguard eligibility chambers for ranking arbitration. The column irised open with a hydraulic sigh. Air density equalized around her like water accepting a new shape. Cadet groups parted. Even overconfident species shrank 6 inches shorter through posture alone when she passed. Students who had minutes earlier filmed their own test entries now lowered camera rigs. The rigs themselves dimmed, not deactivated by force but by automatic sensory overload dampeners, built long ago to prevent sapient distress. The hall assumed footage of incomprehensible events required no civilian permanence. Drake Halser remained upright this cycle. That alone made him conspicuous. Leora paused one step inside the lift column. Drake stood 20 meters away, gauntlet cooling vents still steaming from implosion feedback. He raised his chin, reclaiming theater one last time out of reflex rather than strategy. Drake, you think erasure makes you untouchable? Leora, I think permanence makes bullies measurable. Drake, mass can't judge intent. Leora, mass punishes assumption. The lift closed between them, cutting further response. The column dropped downward through transit rails, light streaming up the walls and racing vectors. Not red. Not blue. A neutral spectrum that meant one thing on Astraeus, unflagged entity passing unhindered. She emerged into Chamber 3G, the Vanguard Core Candidate Q, a crescent-shaped concourse lined with triage AI nests and evaluation tribunals. The nests didn't project arrogance metrics here. They projected tolerances. When she stepped forward, a nest unfolded a reticulated limb of scanning code, then folded it back. No penalty pulse. No stress induction. The AI nest simply published the only statement left available after overflow log deletion. Candidate baseline, indeterminate but durable. Across the chamber floor, a species evaluation group bristled, checking their score tablets. All tablets showed zeros where Leora's ranking should be. Not empty slots, 0. the number that meant not computable. General Vore was there, despite no official invite. He leaned on his cane, carapace dull gray under chamber lights, eyes layered with tactical exhaustion of a man who had fought wars decided by clearer math. He gestured her forward. "You'll stand before a tribunal in council antechamber," he said. "Answer only when asked. They study, not accuse. Still, don't give them what they expect." "What do they expect?" she asked. "A story. A threat. Or a lecture. And what should I give them?" Vore smiled, thin and tired. "A human truth without ornamentation." The doors to council antechamber opened. Inside was a ringed gallery, vacuum-sealed and silent with ceremonial importance. At the heart sat the Galactic Convergence Council, elder representatives from star-aligned empires. Their seats floated above grav plates, but the plates did not engage. Even here, the hall knew better than to test gravitational triggers it could not quantify twice. Counselor Kitharon, an amphibious political intellect swathed in silver-edged Senate robes, opened proceedings. "Kitharon, intent for joining Vanguard Corps?" "Leora, eligibility." A murmur. "Noted." No system tone penalized her brevity because this chamber logged intent richness, not dialogue length. "Kitharon, your score ruptured test constraints." "Mechanism?" "Leora, Hall miscalibration met my threshold." "Threshold adjusted Hall." Kitharon blinked slowly. A blink that lasted just too long. Another counselor, armored in relic iron, asked sharply. "Counselor, are you a weapon?" Leora looked up. "No. I'm the problem your calibration keeps mislabeling." Gasps swallowed. This was not boasting. It was diagnosis spoken like a verdict. The council tried logging it. The tablets glitched. Not errors. Zeros. Drake Halser entered the chamber then. Not to challenge, but to frame the incident. He raised a tablet whose scorelines were blanked by overflow suppression. His breathing finally stabilized under species optics. "Drake, for the record, no combat occurred." "Leora, combat needs participation." "You grabbed." Hall punished prediction, not contact. "Drake, then what occurred?" "Leora, a loop ate its own homework." A beat of silence. The crowd laughed once. A short burst of humor cutting tension, not padding scenes. Kitharon raised a hand. "There is no file of your score." "Ranking?" "Absent." Leora said nothing. Not out of fear. Not out of defiance. But because rumor travels faster than files, and this station will never store a human anomaly twice. Kitharon lowered his hand. He exhaled one bureaucratic sigh. "Rank 1 is elimination default," he declared. "Privileges granted until contradiction." The chamber lights flickered once, then accepted the declaration without overriding it. The contradiction clause meant nothing because contradiction required metrics. Metrics required files. She had none. Leora stepped back, lift column opening again for exit. As the doors sealed behind her, one final council whisper escaped into the chamber. Not logged. Not stored. Only overheard. "We didn't upgrade her. We simply ran out of numbers to argue with." Leora Vance had just been granted rank 1 by elimination on Astraeus, yet the station's internal architecture treated the pronouncement like a provisional law rather than an earned badge. If the system could not measure her entry, it intended to measure her training. Astraeus didn't have classrooms in the conventional sense for top candidates. It had threshold arenas, modular combat laboratories where parameters climbed until one of two results occurred, capitulation or anomaly lock. Her arena was designated T', buried deep within a non-public training spindle whose location refused persistent storage even among staff logs. The doors opened. Sparse white auroral lighting ran along the walls like ion trails, dim by design to prevent sensory feedback bias. The arena was circular, quiet, with containment rings embedded in the floor. At the center rested a gravitic training coil known among instructors as the unforgiving yardstick, not for strength, but for resolving ambiguity in physics-sensitive species. This coil was built by the extinct architects of the Zeraxi Precursor Union, a society that ranked warriors by pain thresholds, not reputation. The Union itself now existed only in fragments, archived by the Galactic Ethnography Vault under Lost Harmonics. General Vor stood at the arena rim when she entered, leaning on his cane, permitted here only because no one else was qualified to instruct anomalies without theatrics. He had shed his armor for a gray pressure jacket with no insignia. "Cadet Leora," he said. "This arena pushes until you respond honestly. If you have limits, they'll appear. If you don't, something else will." The coil at the center clicked awake, iris flanges uncapping like a mechanical pupil dilating. A holofield projected above it, cycle calibrate, ready. Leora walked inward with a measured pace that disdained bravado. The coil pulsed, circles tightening overhead and floor alike. Pressure clamped fast, 3G, 5G, 10.5G. Pins within the floor plates unlatched into dampener struts to prevent arena rupture. Air density stayed cut low. Then the coils paused, waiting for panic, posture failure, or release of psychic armature. Leora knelt not as submission, but as efficiency logic. Her knee rested over a hairline ring. The floor didn't fracture. The system misattributed stability to dampeners. The truth was more unnerving, she simply arranged herself where miscalibration could exert less leverage. Drake Halser was present on an observation balcony now, invited by protocol because his seat in the ranking had never corrupted, even if his score file had. He watched, arms crossed, jaw working through self-argument. The coil spiked oxygen down another 12%, signaling adverse adaptation incentives. Drake leaned outward from the balcony. "Your system's testing atmosphere insults her lineage, General." Vor didn't look up. The system insults itself every time it tries labeling her. The coil heard lineage and ran partial analysis. Error, lineage data format discontinues. It tried reattempt, an abrasive alarm tone sprang into a short ruinous buzz before the arena damped it. Leora finally spoke, soft, to Vor only. "You said don't give them what they expect. What are they expecting now?" A gasp. A collapse. A monologue. He raised a brow. "And?" Leora rested her palms flat against her upper thighs without strain as pressure climbed higher, 12G, then 16G. Her fingers didn't quiver. Her voice didn't rise. "You must hate this coil," Vor said. "I don't hate tools," she said. "Tools have designed parameters. People carry stories." The coil surged another gravity ramp, hitting 22G localized pressure. The floor cracked anyway, micron fractures that spidered out like frozen glass under a hammer. Dampeners amplified in panic pulses, sealing cracks around her feet, not because of her feet, but despite the pressure. The coil's feedback circuit began stuttering overload transmissions between nodes. Leora looked at it this time. Not the observers. Not the general. Not the balcony. Just the coil. She exhaled slowly, then said nothing. That silence was louder than malfunction, heavier than test architecture, deeper than binary arrogance. The coil's central nest flickered with a critical recognition thunk. Holotext above it sputtered white-hot static chains before forming the first accurate sentence spoken about her biology in 44 cycles. Human tolerance, unknown but non-zero. The coil now attempted psychological argument via vocal simulation. Coil voice, threshold reached. Response logged. The voice was synthetic but quivered on the edges. This coil was built to measure pain, but pain ignored species it couldn't define. Leora touched the ring beside her foot lightly with a gloved knuckle. The floor exploded into a circular implosion bloom, not screaming, not psychic, not weapon discharge, just survival reflex giving mathematics to a system that had once starved every organism through calibration punishment. The bloom collapsed exactly inward, choking pressure nodes alone. The coil's AI core light dimmed, not defeated by violence but drained by conceptual impossibility. Kitharon of the Galactic Convergence Council was watching through Astrolink feed, though physically absent, voice transmitted quietly from observation alcove. Kitharon, candidate score? Drake, my file shows zeros, counselor. Kitharon, her output measured? Vor smiled thinly. Only the Coil knows. The Coil doesn't talk outside arenas. Leora stepped backward from the Coil. The Coil tried speaking rank again. It could not. Leora ascended toward the exit lift when one last apprentice from a luminous insectoid species shouted from gallery rim. Cadet insectoid, why should humans hold default rank 1 without metrics? Leora finally raised her voice, not loud, not echoing, but exact. Because some answers outrun the questions that birthed them. The Coil shut down softly. Not a bang. Not a storm. Not a legend boast. A click of surrender from physics itself, tools then silence. Instructors then silence. Ranking then silence. Spectators alone were left with a rumor they could never package into a file or metric because Overflow's deleted lessons with no categories to store them into. Drake exhaled. She never opposed hierarchy. She opposed mismeasuring resilience as fear. Kitharon opened his palm then lowered it. He had no form field left for this girl. Leora walked out, lift spool ceiling behind her. Rank 1. Rumor first. Metric later, never stored, only witnessed.